Well, as I say, Tehran says it's reviewing the latest US proposal and will convey its response to Pakistan, a key mediator in these peace negotiations. For its part, Pakistan is expressing optimism. Posting on social media, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said, "We are very hopeful that the current momentum will lead to a lasting agreement that secures durable peace and stability for the region and beyond." Since most of the oil passing through the Strait of Hormuz would normally be heading to Asia, now seems like a good time to see how the standoff between the US and Iran and their competing blockades are affecting Asia and large buyers like India. Michael Kugelman is a senior fellow for South Asia at the Atlantic Council. He also writes the Foreign Policy magazine's weekly South Asia brief. Welcome to DW. Let's start macro then. How exposed is the region in general and India in particular to what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, India and its neighbors are very vulnerable to the effects of this war, and that's because India and many of its neighbors are heavily dependent on hydrocarbons, mainly oil and gas, from the broader Middle East, and particularly the GCC states, the Arab Gulf states. And we could talk about India's vulnerability, but you could also talk about a country like Pakistan, pardon me, a country like Bangladesh, which is depends on imports for 95% of its full energy needs, and many of those come from the Middle East. And of course, given what's happening with the Strait of Hormuz, there's a significant amount of vulnerability there.
See, lots of people are now saying that this is a problem that the United States should have anticipated before it started this war. And I wonder if any of the Asian countries actually looked at a map and said, oh, this could be a problem, and actually spotted that potential and took action previously to limit their exposure to this risk.
Well, I mean, this is not the first time, of course, in recent times that we've had a major crisis in the Middle East, right? There was a war in Iran last year, last summer, and I think that in many cases, these governments in South Asia, India and others, recognize that they have a big challenge, that they have this significant vulnerability, and some countries, I would argue, in the region have been more successful than others in diversifying their sources of energy imports. India, of course, has been able to depend on a number of suppliers, including the United States, increasingly. India, of course, also has a deep relationship with Russia, and it's dependent on a lot of energy from Russia, which, of course, poses challenges for different reasons for India. But I would argue that for the region, one of the big focus areas right now, and this is not an immediate term fix, but it's something for over the long term, a lot of discussion about how India and other countries need to focus more on exploiting renewables. And countries like India have the capacity to ramp up solar and wind power. India has already made major headway in making renewables a bigger part of its energy mix. And I think that when you have a crisis like what you have in the Middle East now with the war in Iran, that the incentives for ramping that type of use of renewables up has increased even more. And we're starting to see some movement in other countries in the region as well along those lines.
In Western industrialized countries, what we're seeing is, or what the public is feeling is petrol prices, gas prices, and the effects of those, not only on driving, but also on transport costs. My understanding is that in India, it comes even closer into the home through the LNG, liquefied natural gas, and liquefied petroleum gas, in as much as much cooking and home heating is done using these commodities, which would normally come in through the Strait of Hormuz. So it's directly in people's houses.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a two-front crisis for India when it comes to gas. Indeed, as you suggest, natural gas is a critical fuel in the transport sector in India. But also you have many households, more than 330 million households, in fact, in India alone, that rely on LPG for cooking fuel. And many of these households are very poor. And we've seen some extraordinary measures taken by the Indian government to try to address this crisis. And that includes essentially calling on local producers to reallocate supply away from businesses, which include the restaurant and hotel industry, to ensure that households get what limited supply there is. And that's pretty. It's a pretty risky strategy to take. But again, it just shows how much the vulnerabilities, how large those vulnerabilities are in a country like India, which at the end of the day is now the fourth largest economy in the world. In theory, it should be able to insulate itself from these shocks. But given how major these shocks are, even the likes of India have had really struggled to address this challenge.
So let's talk about those mitigation attempts, some of which you touched on just now. We're looking at greater diversification into clean energy, but are we also looking at more coal and fossil fuel-based energy to fill the gap?
Right. I mean, if we want to talk specifically about India, the answer is yes. I mean, coal has long been the most significant part of India's energy mix. It's a major consumer and producer of coal. I mean, it's actually gotten to the point where this year India is expected to start exporting coal for the first time because it's got so much of it. And so, since it has so much of it at home, that's obviously the one of the immediate term solutions is to look more to what it already has with coal. But even as India continues to look to coal, it is indeed over the longer term focusing on ramping up its renewables. Not only has it been able to make headway with wind and solar, it's also declared a national hydrogen mission in recent years with the hope of starting to produce sorry, not natural hydrogen, green hydrogen. It's looking to start producing green hydrogen for the first time next year. And in recent months, it also announced a new nuclear energy mission. So there's going to be a focus on ramping that up as well. But gas is important as well for India, just because it's such an important fuel in the transport sector. So I think that India has the luxury of being able to look at a variety of measures that it can take. Whereas if you look at other countries in the region, particularly Pakistan and Bangladesh, that have not been able to make as much headway with renewables to this point, and also don't have the coal supplies that India does, they have fewer options, which makes things a bit more difficult for them on a policy level.
Okay. And just there's perhaps another economic aspect to this story. The millions of South Asian workers in the Middle East, many of them sending money back home. How big a risk does this instability pose to them and their cash transfers?
No, this is huge. You're right. You talk about India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal. Many countries in the region have a large number of expatriates who are living and working in the Middle East, and many of them send home critical remittances. And in some of the more vulnerable economies in South Asia, particularly Nepal, as well as Bangladesh and Pakistan, those remittances are critical for national economies. They contribute to a significant percentage of the economy. So if this war continues, if the situation continues to be unstable, and if it makes it difficult for these expatriates to remain in the region, working there and sending home funds, then that could actually have a direct and deleterious impact on the economies of these countries in South Asia themselves.
Let's finish with a couple of words about Pakistan, with whom India has such a fractious relationship. But Pakistan also shares a border with Iran. Is that proximity and the fear of having an unstable next-door neighbour, is that one of the factors motivating Islamabad to be so active and indeed effective in peace talks?
Oh, absolutely. I'd argue that Pakistan, perhaps any more than any other country outside of the Middle East, is vulnerable to the effects of the war, and not just the economic effects, because as we've been discussing, many countries in the region are heavily dependent on energy imports from the Middle East. But indeed, in the case of Pakistan, it borders Iran, and Pakistan also has a very large community of Shia Muslims. It's got one of the largest percentages of Shias outside of Iran or Iraq. So the social stability risks for Pakistan are considerable, particularly if Pakistan were to enter the war at one point, which would be highly, highly unlikely. Pakistan wants to avoid it, but it does have a deep alliance with Saudi Arabia, and there's a mutual defense pact between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Saudi Arabia has been hit in this war. And so I think many in Islamabad worry that Pakistan might be in a position at some point where it would be pressured to invoke its mutual defense pact with Saudi Arabia and enter the war, which it does not want to do. So indeed, this is one of the reasons why Pakistan has wanted to position itself as a mediator, because it's wanted to do whatever it can to help move the needle forward toward de-escalating a conflict that poses significant risks to Pakistan.
Good talking to you. Thanks for guiding us through that so clearly. Michael Kugelman from the Atlantic Council.